I called it. Hello, everybody. I know, 2 videos. What a shocker. Well, as it turns out, Overwatch did release their Spotlight, and I gotta say, I'm a little scared. So, as it stands, I just watched the live stream for the Overwatch Spotlight because I wanted to see what Overwatch's next move was against Marvel Rivals, and all I can say is, I'm sorry, I can't. So, as it turns out, they are adding quite a large amount of stuff. They just decided to go whole hog on, pun not intended, by the way, on just about everything content wise. And a lot of it, not surprised at all, is copycatting. And don't get me wrong, I know that the Overwatch community, and you guys can correct me on that, don't flame me, keep in mind, this is from an outside perspective. When Marvel Rivals came out, of course, they had hero bans. People requested hero bans, but here's the thing: is that Overwatch is not built around hero bans. It felt a lot like that. So I'm gonna go over what they added. They are adding 6v6 as an open queue in competitive. They are adding hero bans. They are adding new game modes, and they are adding a shed ton of new cosmetics and 2 new heroes. It doesn't look good though. It makes me worried because, one, it felt a lot like Panic Button. I did mention this in a previous video that they're going to panic, and it very much felt like that. Now, a lot of people thought that this might be a big win, but honestly, personally, this is actually a big worry for Overwatch. Hero bans are not going to fix the game. New game modes are not going to fix the game. New cosmetics are not going to fix the game. Adding the 6v6 back is not going to fix the game. And I'll get into each subject pretty closely. The first one I want to talk about are the hero bans. The reason why hero bans tend to work in Marvel Rivals is because those heroes are the whole I guess you could say design of the game, the way it is. Hero bans work in the sense of very strong heroes that stick out. And that's why people have enjoyed the hero bans in Marvel Rivals. Now, Overwatch, after playing it, doesn't feel like it needs the hero bans because of the role queue, the locked role queue, by the way. You can't have one or both. And now that you've added both, this puts a lot of stress on a lot of players, competitively speaking. Now, I don't know how it's going to be implemented, but they do want to implement hero bans in the competitive state, which is worrying because on top of that, they also added open queue. And the reason why I'm quotating my fingers here for the 6v6 in competitive is because this gets into my next topic. In the 6v6, you are open queue, which means you can play any role you want. You can have one support, 3 DP. You can have one support, multiple DPS, multiple support, few DPS. That's about it. Tanks, Overwatch hates their fucking tanks. I'm just gonna say right now, what tank players? I'm so sorry for you. Like, what the fuck? That's not open queue. That's freedom with limits. It's not open queue at all. What they did was essentially is that they do have an open queue, but it is maxed at only 2 tanks. So you cannot goat, but not like, okay. That's weird, and that's not exactly open queue, in my opinion. Open queue would make sense if you could have basically do every role without cap. But unfortunately, they cap tanks, which I find very peculiar and very punishing to that particular role. I don't know why Overwatch is so, like, why they punish tanks specifically. I don't understand it. And that's very peculiar, especially since it's already stressful enough having to do the 5v5 with only 1 tank role and putting a lot of pressure on tank players in general, especially really good ones. And this, I think, just adds more to that. I mean, you're not giving tank players a little more fun. It's like tank players can't have fun in Overwatch, it seems. But that's not also just another concern. It seems as though that they are also adding new game modes, but these game modes feel like a very weird, chaotic mess. Like, let's just pump this out here and see what happens. They're adding perks to the general base of the game. And here's the thing is that the perks aren't like hero centered and you go in and you already have the perks enabled. No. It's mid game. So mid game, you're playing a hero, and then if you level up your hero, you can select between two perks and have them do different abilities. And I was like, what the fuck? This seems so unnecessary. This felt very much like a panic move, in my opinion. Now, they could have been working on this for quite some time, but this doesn't add to Overwatch, if that makes sense. Like, Overwatch didn't need to have like a perk system, and I feel like this is going to throw the balance of the game not just out of whack, but into a completely other direction that actually might lose more player base than it would gain. They of course didn't add a PvE system, because why would they? It felt very copycatted. And then a lot of their emphasis, of course, during even the highlight and the end of it, was a lot of cosmetic reveal. Again, like I said, actually just in the last video I posted, that pushing content versus the quality of your game is not going to save the game. And that is exactly what we're seeing here. Now, there are going to be balance changes to accommodate for these pretty massive changes coming to Overwatch, but that means that they will have to roll back on some things, and I think that they have to get rid of roll queue in that instance. But hear me out. Nope, that's... Oh! This guy doesn't play much Overwatch. What the fuck he's talking about? Just listen. Just listen. This is coming from an outside perspective, of course, and I said I wanted to kind of look at this from an outside perspective anyway. But the reason why I say this, and I'm very, very, very honest about this, the reason why I say this is because if you have a restricted role, right, and then you put hero bans, well, now you've put yourself in a really, really difficult spot for your players to compete in. Now, keep in mind that this is only exclusive not to quick play, but to competitive. I feel like this would be very, 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 people won't necessarily react well to the hero bans and the role queue existing in the same space, because role queue already causes long wait time. It causes certain heroes to be going as a certain way. Okay, that makes sense, but there's an issue, is that a lot of the heroes are already balanced or tried to be balanced for the 5v5. That adds an issue, because what if you have players that are not only proficient in certain heroes, but those heroes already suck, you know what I mean? And they manage to ban those specific heroes, and now you can't, switch it up. You can't add to the chaos. That being said, now, having them both stacked on top of each other could be a good idea. It could be a really bad idea, but the truth is, I don't know. I don't know, but that's how I see it, though. From the immediate perspective, is that now you're restricting your players even more so in a locked queue system. In an open queue system, it works better because, again, it's an open queue system. You can't have people, zoom across the place like crazy and choose the strongest heroes. That's fine. It works really well with an open queue because it controls the environment, and players can control their balance, basically. You're giving them the freedom to control that balance. Whereas a locked queue, you don't have that much of luxury, unless there's like a specific DPS that you want to lock. But I don't know how the role queue system is going to work, of course. The role queue system is very different. And they've never done a role queue system. Not the role queue system. The ban system, I don't know how it's going to work. Maybe they have a ban for every class, in which case, you ban a tank, you ban a DPS, you ban a support. Okay. Now, in an open queue system, you wouldn't really necessarily need to worry about that. I think what would happen is that it will be very abused in the tank role, right? Because tank can only be locked in open queue for 2 people. Only 2 tanks can be selected. Once the 2 tanks are selected, that's it. That's essentially it. And what I foresee is that people are not going to want to do tanks, and everyone's going to do DPS and support. Tanks will be basically non-existent. That's how I see it. Anyway, that would be my reaction to the whole thing, because I would find that, well, I can only play like 2 different tanks, and if I wanted to play tank and it's already locked, well, guess what? I'm playing DPS. And we all know DPS is the most popular of the roles in any hero shooter. And that's worrying. I'm just going to say that. That's worrying, because that causes issues for the player base and queue times. And the queue times are already long enough as it is. Now, again, I don't know the extreme details of how they're going to balance out, locked role queue and then with hero bans. And there were a lot of things that felt very copycatted of Marvel Rivals, which I'm not surprised. That's very, very common for Blizzard to kind of do in the terms of the development of their games, and a lot of people know this. So when they were starting to do this, I wasn't so surprised. However, I will say it felt like a desperate act. So it felt very last minute. There were a lot of details that just felt very, very, oh shit, there's a Titan at our back door. We got to do something. And that's exactly what happened here. And that's exactly what's happening and going to be happening going forward. They're adding new maps and they're adding new heroes. But to be honest, at the rate Marvel Rivals is pushing their heroes and their map and their content, as well as the quality of their game, they just released a small little tweak bug patch before release on the 21st for their game, as well as do a very big move, of course, being very open about listening to their community about the roles reset, which was a huge power move, and now we have a lot of stuff to look forward to in the next patch. What I like though, and I will say this right now, Marvel Rivals is not making a move to outplay Overwatch. They are staying in their own lane, and Marvel Rivals is basically doing that. There's not been anything about like, oh, now we're gonna add this, this, and this in response to that. At least not yet. And then, especially since it just came out. But that being said, though, Marvel Rivals is probably just gonna sit pretty and be like, no, we're gonna go our route. You guys do you. Meanwhile, Overwatch is panicking, and I feel like this is a panic response. A lot of it felt very panic-like. They basically went all out. They more game modes, giving people hero bans, plus the role queue, plus an open role queue, plus perks, a new mechanic. But I feel like this might actually be the undoing of Overwatch entirely, because while I was watching it, I felt deterred to play competitive. And I wouldn't play competitive listening to these changes, because in the long run, I feel like what's going to happen now is that you're going to have less people play competitive, more people play quick play. Quick play becomes a worse place, and then Overwatch starts tanking in player base because people who want to play competitive are not going to enjoy it. Now, they did add a reward system, so if you play your rank games, you get rewarded with a new skin. I don't care. I'd rather enjoy playing ranked and get rewarded than just play ranked and get rewarded. Because again, a game's about fun. It's not about how much content you can push on the player base. And a lot of people will probably, flame me in the comments. That's okay. You are entitled to your opinion, and that's what this video is about, is my opinion and my take on it. But the truth is, I don't foresee this. Now, this could be just an impulse video. And me not really getting a message. That happens. I'm a human being. I make mistakes. Whoop-de-doo. But I will say it looks a little shady at best. The perk system worries me the most. What worries me second is the role queues. And then, yeah. That's my take on that. The rest of it was just basically cosmetics, what they're going forward with their leagues and stuff like that. Their esports and whatnot. All okay stuff. Like that has no effect on the game. What actually has effect is of course the new chaotic game mode, which is called Stadium. That looked a little worrying. And then now I'm just a broken record. I'm repeating what I said before, which is the open role queue, limiting your tanks. That's a bad idea, I think. And that a lot of it felt avoiding the key issue, which is how their game is running. A lot of it just felt like they're avoiding their key issue. And I don't think this will save or fix the game in any way, shape, or form. And I think we're just going to see a little bit of a self-destructing spiral. And that's essentially what I feel like is pretty much about to happen with Overwatch. Now, you guys can disagree. You guys can say, well, this will actually be really good for us. Again, I am from an outside perspective. I haven't played that much Overwatch in recent time. So maybe a nice little constructive feedback or how you guys feel like this could do. But overall, you'd rather, see this, and that. Because it honestly looks like this, from my perspective, it looks like, oh god, we gotta add bans, we gotta add this, we gotta this. People are loving this. This is why people are loving it. They got bans, they got open queue, they got 6v6. That's why people are loving the game. They're not getting the point. They're not at all getting the point. In my eyes, it doesn't look like they got the point of the message of why people like Rivals over Overwatch, majority of it. And that is fun. When I was watching the whole thing, I don't think what they're going to add is going to be necessarily fun. Unless Stadium ends up popping off and becomes a new identity for Overwatch, okay, that's fine. But a lot of it felt like we need to push as much content that is equivalent to Marvel Rivals as possible. I don't think that's the route to go. You guys need to come up with an identity here. And there's no identity. I thought that they would kind of say, like, we're going to stick to 5v5, or we're going to stick to 6v6. We're going to stick to our role queues. We're going to appropriate our balances with the heroes that come out with those balances. Instead, I felt like it was just a big bowl of spaghetti saying, we got 6v6, 5v5, role queue, the hero bands, a new game mode, cosmetics rewards. Put those in there. Exclusive to. That's what it felt like. This is a whole sum up now. So that's my thoughts on the live stream. A little worrying, not sense of like, is this going to take away from the player base of Marvel Rivals? No, God no. No, Marvel Rivals is popping off, and their new mid-season is coming out, and they already impressed a lot of their audience with how well they respond to people's reactions of a decision that the community doesn't agree with, and so they revert it back. It's very nice to see that, and I think even those small little moves are going to make a huge picture in the long run for Marvel Rivals. As for Overwatch, this will be my last video reviewing on Overwatch, because Marvel Rivals is more my place. Overwatch is not going to be my place. This is the only video that you'll see on that, because I then would have no standing on Overwatch, basically. And I don't have a huge standing on Overwatch. I'm just going to be very honest with that. But from an outside perspective, this looks worrying for a game that a lot of people are clearly passionate about, audience-wise. It seemed like the developers it felt very rushed. The developers seemed like they were rushed for time. Like a lot of stuff that was happening. And that's exactly what was reflected in the content that they were posting and their announcements. It just felt very rushed. But that's just from an outside perspective. I'd like to hear what people inside the community have to say, and leave some good thoughts. Be very of those natures. So yeah, that's my take on the Spotlight. In the meantime, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you on the next video. Peace.